Hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in as always. I am Kaylee Batesman, the Content Director at She Can Code, and today we are discussing Tech for Good. Now, Tech for Good is all about using technology to solve social and environmental issues and create a positive social impact. Companies in this area aim to tackle the biggest problems the planet faces, including climate change, food inequality, and social justice. So today we have Krista Griggs, Head of Financial Services and Insurance at Fujitsu UK, here with me today to explore the world of Tech for Good and why more women should be a part of it. Welcome, Krista.
Thank you, Kaylee. Great to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. Can you kick off with a little bit of a background about yourself to set the scene for our listeners today?
Yeah, of course. So I'm Dutch, actually, originally, but now I've been in Britain for about 22 years now, so a little bit of a hybrid in many ways. And I started my career in software development. And what I loved about that was the ability to create new things, to make things easier for people and for whether that's end users or colleagues. And so that's been something that's been really a passion for me all the way through my career as I've progressed through becoming an architect, working in different domains, so financial services, defense, central government, logistics. And it's really been that curiosity that for me has driven my passion to continue to develop things. And I carry that very much with me now. And so I direct a sector now, more a leader and less of a technologist, but it's really having that passion for technology and the impact it can create that differentiates me, and that means that I can add value to what we do.
Sounds like you're another one of our ladies that we speak to often who say, you know, they didn't plan to come into tech, that they did lots of careers before they came into it. And did you know before you came into tech, was that a draw to the tech sector, actually, the impact that you can have?
Yeah, I think it was actually. So absolutely, it's the ability to create things through the technology. So it never has been for me from the start of the falling into a career in tech, because it was a little bit like that. It was never about the technology itself. It was actually being able to make a difference. And I think that's more common for women generally anyway. And that's not to say men aren't driven by the same, but I think maybe women have more permission to be driven by purpose. I don't know what's really behind it, but yeah. So for me, it has absolutely been a vehicle for being able to make change and make a difference.
Yeah, and I think it's something that a lot of people don't realise as well about the tech sector until you come into it, that there is the opportunity to make an impact there, even if you don't work in the area of Tech for Good, obviously, which we are going to be discussing today. So if we jump in with our first question for you is, what exactly is Tech for Good?
So the power of technology is incredible, and especially now with all the changes. Some of it's been driven by people using more digital channels because of the pandemic and lockdown, people becoming more accustomed to doing, grandparents, having Zoom calls or video calls with your grandparents. People are becoming much more in tune with being able to use technology as part of everyday life. And as a consequence, the tech sector is continually driving things. But the key with that is there's massive power, but therefore there's also risk. There's risk in terms of who are we leaving behind through doing this. There's risk through are we building it for competitive advantage, or are we building it to do the right thing for society? And so it's one of the things that worries me, to be honest, around the ethical, how do we define the ethics around what we're building, and is what we're building actually the right thing? Because often, especially new technologies, are considered to be geeky topics, and therefore it attracts more men generally than women, and because it has this association that it's geeky and it's really technical, but actually in reality it can be really beautiful, but only if we intend it to be so.
Yes, Yeah, and it's interesting there that you talk about risk and not leaving people behind in our intentions. I think that's an incredibly important part, because I think people might come into the tech sector with the idea that they can come in and they can make change and they can do good. And perhaps if they join the wrong company, they might not actually find that opportunity for them. So I think it's about making sure that if you do not just enter the tech sector with the plan of going into Tech for Good, but that you join a company that encourages you to create you an environment where you can actually make an impact. But I think that absolutely depends on which company you pick and what their mission is, and whether they're transparent about what they actually plan to do. Why do you think Tech for Good is important? You already mentioned obviously the changes there with COVID and how much technology in society has changed. Why do you think it's important nowadays?
So I think every business now is a technology company. Every business is underpinned by implementing different technology solutions to make it easier, more accessible in many ways, and safer in the context of COVID pandemics and things like that. But it sort of comes back to, therefore, technology. You can't get away from technology, and there isn't enough talent, and there are more and more women getting into technology, and then there's more diverse workforce. But if we look at technology, it's still very much a male dominated area, and not by intention generally, but by simple unconscious bias about not having enough voices in the room when you're talking about what you want to create, when you're designing it, when you're testing it. It's all the way through the life cycle, by not having voices with diverse backgrounds who are considering all of society, by not representing all of society in the team who is focused on creating new technology and new businesses. You just forget, people just forget, often not intentionally so. And that's why I think it's really important that women, as 50% of the population, as one demographic group, but more broadly, people from lots of different backgrounds do have a voice, do take their voice, and do get involved and understand that actually maybe they're not that technical, but maybe it is the other parts that is the value that they add. There's plenty of people who've got the technology skills and they can be learned, but it's about having the values and the skills that you've got as an individual that you can bring to add to the conversation, that can really make a change, and that can really create solutions that are better for society. Because if you look at the metaverse and the way that we're consuming different services, from entertainment, from travel, education, it's everywhere. It's the way we buy, and so it's really important to me that women have a voice in all of those environments and where the decisions are made about what we're building.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, you see it in the press, don't you, where a product has been released and, as you say, there hasn't been diversity at all levels, and somehow a product has made it through to release, and you think, Grace, there'd just been one person along that way that just would have said, you know what, this isn't going to work, or that doesn't quite work for certain individuals in society. As you said that, it's not just about having people in the techie roles or what we assume are the geeky roles, but even right through to launch, with PR and as you said, testing, and so many areas to get something live. You're absolutely right. It's not just encouraging more diversity in the tech roles, which you say, as you said, there are the more male dominated roles traditionally. Can you give us some examples of Tech for Good in action?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a huge range. So one area is around creating technology solutions that make it easier. So for example, the introduction of cards for people who were less fortunate or who were isolated, or neighbours in the pandemic. They were created very quickly to help and support people. And similarly, now with the cost of living, we're seeing things. So I'm from financial services environment, so that's where I know a lot of what we do. So now we see things being introduced like providing more information around financials and financial education to make better decisions, around advising what you can do to manage your spend. More than anything, it's roundups to help you save, but also around making sure that things are better for disabled people. So one of our customers have been working. We've been having conversations with them around how we can do more like this, where people with epilepsy can be triggered by flashing lights. And so this customer built with Zoom a new feature into Zoom to make sure that you can filter out. So Zoom will automatically detect the right and appropriate levels of flashing images, and will dim, if you switch on this Swift setting, it will dim the flashing lights so that people don't get accidentally triggered by flashing lights on a Zoom call, for example. Oh, wow. And it's really simple things like that. But also we see a lot, for example, we do a lot with blockchain, because in the less developed world, there's agriculturists, there's farmers who don't necessarily have access to anything other than a mobile phone, and being able to create a backbone to help those farmers have access to be able to trade and grow. So those are a few examples.
And I think as well, what was nice there is you covered such a spectrum of ideas, because I think when people think tech for good, they think it has to be on an international basis. It has to be, as we mentioned in the intro, we talk about climate change, and it could cover war, or finding a cure for cancer, or whatever it may be. But actually you really took that down to everyday things like communicating easier with your family, and cost of living crisis, obviously, which is a huge thing at the moment. So I think it's sometimes people might think, actually I'm going into that area because I have to solve these massive world problems, and actually day to day you can still be helping people on a daily basis, on a smaller scale, and still be working in tech for good. I think as well, you just reminded me there, talking about the examples there that you offered. It reminds me of when I used to work a lot with the not-for-profit Apps for Goods, because when I worked with Apps for Good, it's the children that used to come up with the ideas for their apps, and obviously in terms of tech for good. And the ideas that they came up with, it was so wonderful to see children who could just see the world completely different to an adult as well, and they didn't overthink it. They didn't think, how would the tech work, would it make money or anything like that. They just saw it as a simple, there's a need, and they come up with a solution. I remember a child telling me once that water shortage in certain countries, and he said, if we have we have all that seawater there, why don't we just come up with an idea of how to make that water drinkable? And it was just so innocent the way that he just said it. He didn't see barriers. He just came up with an idea and went with it. But yeah, I think sometimes as adults we might talk ourselves out of ideas like that.
But that's exactly the point why having diversity is really important, because children have a completely different perspective, and therefore they're not conditioned by what's expected. What society expects, what's the right thing to do, and so they often do have really good ideas. And what you're talking about are, there's lots of different ways that we harvest water now, drinkable water, to support people in dire need of that as a consequence of the global warming. But it's exactly that point of having different perspectives, and no one would come when you have groupthink, when you have lots of people who are the same. You all come up with the same idea, and you'll go, yeah, that's a really good idea, and then you develop that further because everyone's in their comfort zone. And so by adding different voices, it can feel really uncomfortable, but it's those uncomfortable conversations and actually saying, you know what, I don't agree because of this, because of that, and feeling empowered to be able to say that, put your hand up and say, I don't agree. I don't see things that way. and being able to then have a safe environment, have the conversation. That's where the magic happens. That's where the innovation happens, and that's where Tech for Good is sort of a topic that I'm really passionate about, because it's having those different perspectives. And the whole concept, what I was saying about the change, the feature in Zoom, was all because someone actually got triggered with epilepsy, and so it's only if you bring people who are from different communities that you would get access to information like that. So I think it's really important to better represent society that you're serving in developing technology.
Yeah, absolutely. And that actually leads me to my next question about, why is it so important that we get women involved in Tech for Good? And I think you really addressed it there, and having that diversity of thoughts. Do you think women bring anything else in that way? You mentioned at the start, women might bring different traits as well, and maybe working for a company that has more of a purpose might be more suited for females. Is that something that you see yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think when there's a couple of things to that. So when you bring diversity, generally what you find is when you make something better for one person, you make it better for society. I was recently saw a post by someone who was at an airport where there was a really big ramp, which was obviously created for wheelchair users, but actually almost everyone used the ramp. There were toddlers, there were people with who were struggling to walk because they'd broken a bone, or there were so many different people carrying their luggage around. And so actually when you create something for one part of society, generally you create something that is better for everyone. And we see that in culture surveys as well. So in teams that have got higher gender diversity, we see better engagement scores. In other words, by making the team better set up to support women who may have different needs, it actually creates an environment where everyone feels better supported. And therefore, so I think that's one of the powers of bringing diversity and specifically bringing women into a team. There's a real, and sounds really generalizing, and I don't intend it to be generalizing, but by and large, women are socially a little bit more capable of bringing people together. So actually, often women are really good team leaders. They bring the team together, and they create a more authentic culture. And that's another thing where you find that often men feel more comfortable in a space like that as well. Yes. And so those are some of the benefits that adding diversity and adding women into teams can have.
Yes, yeah, and definitely. And we've spoken a lot there about the benefits of adding more women into a team. How do you think organisations can encourage more women to, go into Tech for Good and to feel like they can make a difference in that area?
So there's lots of different ways, and within our company, so I'm co-chair of our Women's Business Network as well. So I see quite a lot of what we do, and it's very data driven, and it's really around looking. Firstly, it is a known fact that women will only apply for roles when they feel they can meet 100% of the requirements, rather than men who often at 50-60 they'll have a go. And so it's about how you write your job specs, how you present yourself out, what policies you have in place to support women specifically, or carers of any kind. And again, this goes back to, if you do it for women because you think that they're looking after kids, actually you find that people look after elderly neighbours or family members, and giving that ability for men to be able to do that as well means that the well-being for everyone is improved. So it's providing all the different policies. It's celebrating and having role models. So I think role models are really, really important as well in showcasing. You can't be what you can't see. It's a very simple saying, but actually it's very true. So again, it's celebrating the women in tech that you've got, and showcasing that. It's encouraging women or girls technology as well, because it's even at that level where that change happens. So getting involved with universities and schools and bringing the women in tech and talking about what they're doing and the impact that they're having. So those are some of the ways that you can encourage. We can encourage more women. And I mean, we have very strict rules about making sure that there's a diverse set of candidates for any interview, for any role. So it's being deliberate about the values that you have as a company and actually living them through how you implement your policies and how you actually behave.
Yeah, it's interesting you say there about going to the universities and speaking to the students and ensuring that they know, the jobs that are available and what they look like. Because I think you're absolutely right there. There's a skill shortage in tech, and actually you encourage those young women to say, here's what you can do. It's not just about coming in and putting on a pair of headphones for the day and doing some coding, that you can actually really make a difference to society. And this is the real world impact that you can actually have within technology. I think there is that stereotype, and it's always going to be there unless we try and have conversations like this, and as you mentioned, going into universities and just sharing the fact that technology, you get to work across a range of sectors when you work in the tech sector, and that you can really make a difference. And I think that's something that perhaps a lot of young students really don't know and don't understand. And as you say, it's about getting those ladies out there to say, this is what I do, and this is how I make a difference. What are we likely to see in the future for the Tech for Good sector?
I think it's a hugely growing sector at the moment. I mean, the energy space is a really good example where there's an enormous amount of investment in decarbonising. So that's one area, and it touches on everything, because it touches on transport, and therefore manufacturers and retail and travel. And so that's very, very big. And I think also consumers are now demanding that the companies that they buy from are showing more than just making money, that they are committing to a purpose, and they show that commitment. And therefore consumers are demanding that, employees are demanding that. So I think it's a huge space, and that comes down to the diversity and just being more open to delivering better outcomes for society.
Yeah. And I think a lot of our ladies, they're first and second jobbers, they're quite junior ladies, and they always wonder how to get into certain areas of technology. I think, as we've mentioned, there's always that stereotype that you have to study computer science and come in and do a coding based role. As obviously from your experience as well, you have had quite a range of jobs already before you came into tech. For our ladies listening, if they wanted to move into Tech for Good, is there a certain route there, or do you think it's even approaching somebody in your own company perhaps and starting a new project, or are there any tips there that you would share?
Yeah, absolutely. So the key thing for me is to be curious. So understand for yourself, what is it that you're passionate about? What is it that makes you get up in the morning, and then look at what happens in that space. So go and find out, do some research, and then see if you can, even on a voluntary basis, start getting involved and just observe what's happening, or read books or follow podcasts, for example. There are lots of different ways where you can learn a little bit and then reach out. And then it's really about having the confidence to say, actually, I'd love to learn a little bit more about this. Could you help? And when you reach out to people in a way like that, then most people feel flattered because you are seeing them as knowledgeable, and therefore they're quite happy to help generally. So it's really about understanding what you're passionate about, bring that passion, and then be bold and be curious.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I think you just saying that, asking people as well, and making sure that it sounds like that you're asking for their support and their help. I think that's something that we struggle with now a lot of us are working from home, making those connections to be able to reach out to somebody and say, I want to do something new, I want to start a new project. And because perhaps you might not have those connections that you would have had if you were in the office full time, or, you know, even I think in-person events is something that, you know, we're starting to get back into that rhythm. But it was definitely something at the start that, you know, we missed out on for some time.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's getting involved in any sort of networks. Most companies have got women's business networks or other networks, but getting involved in anything that gets you exposed to different people is a good way of trying to learn a little bit more.
Yes, yeah. Lovely. Okay, well, we are out of time, I'm afraid. So thank you so much for joining us today, Krista. The conversation has been really, really interesting. I'm sure our ladies will find it extremely useful. So thank you so much for coming in and sharing your insights today.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. It was really enjoyable.
Thank you. And for everybody listening, as always, thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you again next time.